Are you a self-storage owner or operator looking for service providers to help at your facility? Well, the Storage Business Owners Alliance, also known as the SBOA, has you covered. The SBOA is a premier online hub for connecting self-storage owners and operators to industry-leading products and service providers. We provide one-stop shopping for your business with exclusive offers to save time and money. At the SBOA, we believe by coming together, we help owners and operators grow revenue, gain purchasing power, reduce expenses, improve efficiencies, and increase profitability. We also offer many resources such as our conferences and self-storage unlock webinars to help self-storage owners and operators gain the knowledge needed to become more competitive in the industry. To become an SBOA member or to find out more information, please visit www.thesboa.com today. We can't wait for you to join the Alliance.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another Self-Storage Unlocked. My name is Jessica Johnson. I'm the Vice President of the Storage Business Owners Alliance, and we do this webinar series just about twice a month to bring industry education to all of our self-storage owners, operators, managers out there. So once again, thanks for joining us. We've been in the business now for almost 25 years. We own a portfolio of close to 150 locations, which we have since then sold, and we will probably be buying one hopefully in the near future. So we consider ourselves pretty well versed in the industry. And as you saw in that earlier commercial, we do have a new educational series called Storage for Rookies. If you are a newer owner operator or maybe a manager that's looking to possibly own a facility one day, or even if you're looking to grow and scale your business, it's a really good one-day virtual event where we bring industry experts together to teach you the building blocks of how to get started in this industry and excel and do well. So before we get started, we cannot do these type of events if it weren't for some of our partners and industry experts out there. So huge shout out to storageauctions.com and Alana Ross for being here with us today, and Jeff Greenberger from Late to Lean. And I have a quick clip to show you before we get started, so stay tuned.
Storage auctions or lien sales are a costly hassle. You don't see storage facility owners on the storage auction TV shows. That's because storage auctions mean lost rent and lower occupancy. StorageAuctions.com gives you a better way to handle the worst part of the business by turning the chaos of auction day into a controlled process. We provide an online auction system that puts you in control and gives you an effective way to actually have fewer auctions and higher recovery rates. With traditional storage auctions, many facilities can't have frequent or monthly auctions, and that means that some units sit accumulating more delinquent rent until you have enough units for an auction. You then may have to pay an auctioneer and endure the disruption to your business on auction day. This is not what you want. With StorageAuctions.com, you can have an auction anytime, and you don't pay auctioneer fees or have to deal with any disruption from crowds of bidders at your facility. Online auctions attract more bidders from farther away, and that means when you do have an auction, you get a higher recovery rate. With StorageAuctions.com and the ability to have an auction anytime, we show you how to use the auction to improve collections so that you actually have fewer units go through the sale. Lower delinquency and higher occupancy means that your business becomes more valuable. To see how our system works, contact StorageAuctions.com today to speak with an auction coordinator.
So I'm going to bring up my first guest, Miss Alana Ross from StorageAuctions.com. Hey, Alana.
Good morning.
Good morning. Where are you sitting today there, Miss Traveler?
I am about 2 hours south of you in Daytona Beach, Florida. I'm on the wrong coast than my normal location.
You are. This isn't as early as a webinar as it would normally be for you if we did it at 11 a.m. Eastern. So, well,
No,
thanks for being here.
I'm very excited to be here. Very excited to speak with my good friend Jeff. So it should be a great event.
It should be. So, Alana, tell us a little bit about you, and then we've got a good briefing of storageauctions.com, but give us the rundown of who you are, how long you've been in the industry, and what you do for storage auctions.
So my name is Alana Ross. I've been in self-storage for 14 years now, heading into my 15th year. I'm the business development manager for storageauctions.com. I handle the auction process with owner operators from beginning to end, making sure they have a great transition through the online auction process.
Awesome. And we're going to get into the nitty gritty of the proper way to auction someone's stuff off. You just don't get rid of people's stuff. So, well, thanks for being here today. And I'm going to bring up my next guest. We have Jeff Greenberger from Late to Lien. Hi, Jeff.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. I'm not anywhere where a hurricane can hit me, so I'm not warm either.
But it's dreary where you are, right?
Dreary. That's the best thing we can say. You're lovely Cincinnati, Ohio. Thanks for having me.
Ohio. Yeah, thanks for being here. And for those of you that don't know Jeff is like one of the top 3 self-storage lawyers out there in the industry. So Jeff, give us a rundown about who you are and what you do and how long you've been doing this.
Sure. So I wear 2 hats. I'm a self-storage attorney, I guess. I've been branded that. And I thought I was just a regular attorney. And I practice a lot in the area of self-storage. I represent a lot of owners, operators, management companies, trying to help them hone their operations to try to avoid legal liability. We do a lot of rental agreements, help them with their lien sale procedures and other operational issues. We don't focus anymore on the closings and forming the partnerships and so forth. We've gotten away from all that sort of stuff, really to focus on operational issues, trying to avoid lawsuits, trying to avoid employee claims, trying to avoid those sorts of issues. I wear a second hat, which is a company that you mentioned, Late to Lien, which is not part of my law firm, but we've developed it as an automated system which coordinates with your management software to automate the late and lien noticing for you, so you don't have to be an expert on how to get those late and lien notices out, get them out legally compliant, get them out with the right wording, calculate the right dates, and do the advertising if you have to do it in your state properly. That's all it does. And then it magically dumps it off to companies like Alana's to do the sales. We're not a competitor of any of the online auction companies. We're not a collection agency. We're the legal compliance part only. So we protect you from doing that part wrong that can get you sued. And I think that's sort of why we're here today. I do just ABA requirements. We've been getting beaten over the head. Please just understand today, I'm here for general legal information only. I've been warned and beaten over the head with this to warn you or remind you. Any information you get today is general in nature only, and any information you get today should be reviewed with your own legal counsel, and that today's information does not establish an attorney-client relationship with us today. Sorry.
Awesome.
Awful legal information. It sounds so discouraging at the beginning, but
No, but I understand why you need to do that. And I appreciate you doing that. So, and I love your system because a lot of people get that whole process wrong. They don't send it out on the right date. It's a lot of confusion out there. So it seems like you're taking that burden off the owners with the late to lien process. And then, so you were mentioning you don't do you wouldn't formulate like an operating agreement anymore. You used to do that, but you've gotten away from that at your firm.
Right. We really only are doing the stuff that people don't know how to do in other states. There's plenty of really solid business attorneys that know how to form an operating agreement for you to buy your facility. We'll advise them on the self-storage intricacies if there are necessarily those in your but we're really, you don't need us for that. You don't need a self-storage attorney to buy a self-storage facility per se.
Correct. Gotcha.
You do for a rental agreement. You do for a lien sale. And that we find there aren't really a lot of attorneys around that know how to do that. So,
Yeah. Awesome.
Right.
Well, I brought Alana back up. So we'll get this kicked off with some questions. And again, to the audience, I highly encourage you to ask questions that you may have for Jeff and Alana that are relevant to today's topic. So I'm going to start it off. I love when Alana said this during our planning call, like, when should I even hire a lawyer if I'm doing this, getting into it, or even if I've been involved in the industry and I don't necessarily have counsel that I've worked with previously?
I'm going to let Alana answer that first.
I talk to owner operators all the time from they're looking to buy a facility. And I tell them to contact their local lawyers. But as soon as they buy that facility, they need to contact somebody like Jeff, have them review their lease and make sure if it's existing facility that they are in compliance with their state laws. There's a lot of intricacies of owning a self-storage facility. Don't get yourself sued, and let's stay out of trouble and bring somebody in to avoid you being in trouble.
For
Right.
sure.
And
Jeff, anything to add to that?
Yeah. Please don't contact me 1 week before closing or any self-storage attorney. If you want it done right, we need time to actually sit down and talk with you. If you want to buy a form, those are available online. If you want a real lawyer to work with you and help understand what you're doing, I always like to joke, and this is before Alana's time. There were, and yours too, Jess. There was a TV show on when I was a kid called The Greatest American Hero. And the whole premise of the TV show is a guy found a superhero suit and the instruction manual. He promptly lost the instruction manual and tried to learn to be a superhero wearing this suit. And he kept flying into walls and so forth because he didn't have the instruction manual. So you can get a storage rental agreement. If no one sits down and explains to you how to use it and what the norms are in the industry and what your options are, you're going to fly into walls and hurt your head badly. Figuratively, you're going to end up getting sued anyway, or endanger yourself of getting sued. You really want to sit down and talk to a self-storage attorney at least a month or two before you open or before you take over, so that you understand what your options are as far as a rental agreement, as far as other documents and operating documents like that. Not just calling and saying, hey, I'm opening in a week, slap a form on me. You're not doing yourself any favors. And by the way, these agreements don't cost a lot. If you're investing $1 million, $2 million in a facility, none of the attorneys that do this sort of work charge that much money. I'm talking several $1,000s on a multi-million-dollar investment to protect yourself. It's well worth doing it right, doing it custom, and giving yourself a little bit of time to get your head wrapped around it, and then getting it loaded into your software properly.
You'd be amazed at how many people you see on the various social groups across various platforms that are like, hey, I'll send you my lease. You can use mine. I live in Arizona. Your facility's in Florida. It should work there too. And it's not going to contain the appropriate information. And it's very dangerous that people share that without getting legal counsel.
And I see people all the time who say, I got a free one with my software. Mm-hmm. Right? That's not a free rental agreement with purchase of software. That's simply a placeholder. We don't want to pick on any one particular software, but one that I see all the time is a 30-year-old agreement from North Carolina. Well, you can imagine that North Carolina statutes changed several times. It was never really written to be compliant in the first place. And if your agreement hasn't been updated in 30 years anyway, you're getting what you paid for, which is you paid nothing, and you're getting exactly that. It's just a placeholder for where your rental agreement actually goes. So please don't think because there's a rental agreement that is in the software that you bought that's in any way meant to be what you're supposed to use. It's not. They will tell you right off the bat, it's not state compliant. It's not meant for use. It's only a placeholder agreement.
So let's talk about state compliance on leases and not using something that's like a general template. If someone was trying to figure this out, obviously going to their state level association would be starting point number one, correct?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
And some state associations have a form rental agreement that they'll sell you. And that's a good starting point. And if that's all you're willing to do, fine. It's better than using an index card, and it's better than using a 30-year-old outdated agreement that isn't even state compliant. Again, you're investing millions of dollars in something, or hundreds of thousands of dollars in something. What you get with a state association rental agreement is because I've written some, and I'm the author of some of them, and so I say this as I write them. They have to be everything to everybody, and so they can't be something individual to you. So you definitely lose a certain level when you use a state association rental agreement. It's not going to be custom to what you do, and it's going to be missing things that you may want your agreement to have. And if nothing else, it's going to be a checkmark fest, right? The ones we write say, if this facility has a gate, then check here. If it doesn't, then check here. If you give 24-hour access, then check here. If you don't, then check here. It can be quite daunting to make sure you've checked all the right boxes to even have it read halfway right. But for example, I don't know too many state rental agreements that deal properly with a vehicle being stored in or out. So you get baseline. It's
Sure.
certainly better than nothing.
Right.
But again, couple $1,000s on $1 million investment. I'll take it for what you want. I'm not trying to sell you leases.
Right.
I want you to understand what the various degrees are. You can get something from your state association. That's good. Is it great? No.
Gotcha. And
I sit on the Arizona board, and it's amazing how many people don't know that their association does offer these services. I direct people regularly. Check on your website, check your forms and resources. You have a vehicle addendum. You have, your lease in there, and we keep that updated. And it's amazing how many people are like, oh, I didn't know you would do that. So if you're part of an association, see what they offer. Check out their website. See what they can do for you.
Yeah, and we talked about this during the planning call, and any owners, operators out there that are not part of at least your state level association, I would highly encourage you do that. You have a multi-million-dollar asset on your hands, and to be part of state association is hundreds of dollars a year. I mean, it's so minuscule in the grand scheme of, expenses that you have to output, and the resources, the educational events are well worth it. Well worth it. So we did ask a poll question. I think this is interesting. So we asked, what type of legal concerns do you have for your business? And the number one response thus far, and again, please answer those poll questions if you haven't already to the audience, was keeping track of changing laws. Jeff, what's your best guide on that for people to figure out the changing laws and how to stay abreast of when that's happening?
So there's a lot of ways. You answered it perfectly. Be a member of your state association. When you're a member of your state association, among many other things, you're going to get updates from your state association when there are law changes. And you're helping fund those law changes, at least the good ones. And you're helping fund the fights against the bad ones.
Right.
You're going to be able to attend an annual state meeting where they're going to brief you on what legislation is pending, good and bad, so that you're aware of it. They're going to tell you when to write your congressmen or senators to support things and fight things or oppose things. So that's really a great way to do it. And there's an expression in all legislation, not in any particular state. When it comes to legislation, you're either at the table or on the table. And so if you're not a member of your state association, you're to blame for bad legislation, because you got to be there. You got to be part of the process. You got to be part of the funding to help support and fight bad stuff. Bad legislation generally comes because someone complains about what a bad operator did. And then somebody's like, oh, we should write a law.
And you've experienced that in your career, right, Jeff?
Twice.
Yeah.
It happened in Maine, and it happened in Louisiana, where a bad operator did something to a legislator, and the legislator went back to the state capitol and wrote damning bills against the industry. And it was only those things were at least knocked down, if not completely stopped. In Maine, they almost ended up with a complete board funded by taxes against the association, against operators to supervise self-storage. As operators, you almost end up with a complete bureaucracy just to supervise you all. It's just awful. And right now, there's the whole protection plan industry's in peril in New Mexico because an operator ignored what a state insurance commissioner wanted them to do on their protection plan. I mean, this stuff happens. Other places, the National SSA posts those sorts of things. I blog about it on my Twitter, which also posts to my website. You can follow it there. There's all sorts of places. So all you have to do is keep your head out of the sand and you'll know. But then you have to follow it. A lot of these changes in laws require you to follow some pretty strict requirements. There's, thank you.
You're welcome. That's Jeff's website for anyone that wants to go check out his blogs.
Right. So, and I don't do a lot of it. I'm not a very bloggy person, but that's what I do. I post the blogs about legal changes in the industry. You have to follow what comes because these things do require type size, buy-ins, affirmative consents, changes to your policies, and you can't just read it and go, oh, okay. There are often changes that have to be made to your rental agreements, to your sales policies, etc. I think back to Nevada. There were some very, very, very technical changes that had to be made to rental agreements when their bill got changed as far as how protected property was dealt with and how you had to ask about that protected property and deal with that protected property during lien sales. But another change that no one noticed in Nevada is they passed a law that made it a misdemeanor to advertise climate control if you didn't specify the temperature range in your advertising when you called it climate control. That's a misdemeanor. So you got to be a member of your state association or some other group. I mean, look, I assume the SBOA also puts this stuff out. I mean, when we notify you of these things, it gets out on your feeds. I mean, everyone tries, but you have to be a member of the community. If you're a maverick and you're just out there and you're not a member of these sorts of things, that's how you're going to miss it. And
I want to give some. No, you're good. And we'll turn over to Alana too, because I'd like to mention this, and we'll get into like lien law and late fees and lien fees. But Alana, talk to us a little bit when there is a lien law update in a particular state. Your team does outbound calls to owners in the state to let them know, right? So talk me through that a little bit.
So we testify a lot when it comes to the lien sales and the processes because the world of storage wars told the United States and everybody across the world that owner and operators are making hands over fist of money, selling millions of dollars in auctions. And that's not the case. So we have to go before, committees and explain, here's our data. This is truly what's being done. Newspapers, no one is reading the newspapers anymore. The newspapers are not a thing. So we're fighting right now a lot for the digital advertisements for the public notices to be done. And whenever we find out that a law has changed, we know as soon as the bill's introduced, we do work closely with the SSA. So we find out the bill has been introduced and we will, champion it, encourage all of our contacts across that state to support the bill. And when it passes, then we let them know this is passed. The governor has signed it. It's into the law. Here's the date it goes into effect. This is what you need to know, and we'll break it down. We will share it with our partners like the SBOA. We will go on a campaign of emails and phone calls. We don't just call our customers. We want to make sure that operators across that state that the law has changed are in compliance, because all it takes is one owner operator to do something out of compliance and everybody's under that microscope. So we just try to mitigate that and reduce down any errors that are made. We all want everybody to do things on the up and up and follow their lien laws, and we will break it down. You only have to do one newspaper ad. Your newspaper ad is no longer necessary. You now can do a public notice. Here's how to do a public notice. And then we'll even tell them they've also added these preliminary pieces of information that are required in your public notice. You now have to provide their address or their full name and unit number. So we try to break it down and give you all the information in addition to the bill and tell you, here's the bill, review it, contact your lawyer, make sure you're following compliance, because we are not lawyers. We are bringing you the information. We are breaking it down of how we interpreted it, but always err on the side of caution and contact your legal counsel.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great advice. Let me ask you this. This just came in from Michelle McKee. Hold on. This is on my phone too. So I'm multitasking here, fellas and lads and ladies. When the law changes for past tenants, do we have to have them sign a new lease? I understand updating the lease for new tenants coming in, but what about those tenants that are already there? Jeff?
Well, I guess it depends on how much the law changes.
Okay.
Right. There can be law changes that don't matter at all.
As it relates to the lease?
Right.
Sure.
Some of them relate strictly to lien sales. Some can be done by just sending out a written notice. For example, there have been law changes recently that say you may now notify your tenants by email if you obtain affirmative consent. And the law says you can obtain that affirmative consent in the written rental agreement or subsequent written document. So no new written rental agreement, just can send something else out. So the answer to that is as wide and broad as any law change can be. So It's really hard to answer.
Gotcha.
Yes,
okay,
I have a question for you on those. So things like an email or text message, whatever way they're now being able to communicate. I had an owner operator just ask me, I'm just going to send a letter and say, if you don't respond opting out, you're opting in. Or do you say you should get the permission to opt in rather than if you don't respond, you're in?
There's a big difference of opinion among attorneys on that issue. And I think it really depends on how big the changes are you're making. Obviously, we all know we raise rent without getting new signatures or opting in all the time, right? So there are what we call sort of inorganic changes. Dear tenant, please be advised we're changing the mailing address or where you send your rent, or we're raising your rent, or we changing a late fee or something like that. But if you're making really big, significant changes, you've had your rental agreement reviewed, it turns out you're missing really important provisions. I did a rental agreement review with somebody a couple days ago in a state where there's, say, like 9 requirements of what needs to be in a rental agreement. Or I'll use a different one. There's a requirement in California. One of the requirements for a California rental agreement is you have to ask for the an additional person to whom the preliminary lien notice and other additional notices can be sent. And there's a got you right after that sentence. It says, if you don't ask for this, if you don't provide this spot in the rental agreement, you don't ask for it, you don't have lien rights. So let's say somebody comes along and says, hey, I just discovered, among many other things in my rental agreement, I don't ask that question. I don't think you can just like send out a sheet of paper saying, if I don't hear from you in the next 10 days, providing me an alternate contact, I'll just assume you've opted out and say like, I fixed my rental agreement. I think on those, you might want to actually obtain a signature. Because when you say something like that, what you're really doing is you're relying on a judge later to agree with you that opt-in was good enough.
Was the right move, right?
In that, right? That's
Yeah.
just not good enough for me to sleep at night saying, all right, I just sent 300 letters out saying these following 9 things that I was missing from my rental agreement, or this really critical thing, or the new arbitration and mediation and release of the liability, all that stuff you just opted in because your occupant's going to come to court that day when you're trying to enforce and say, I never saw that. I never agreed to that. I never got that letter.
Yeah.
And
Too many like
to do.
loopholes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
You're better off getting a signature in some of those bigger changes.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah, I would agree. I'm going to ask this question from the audience real quick, and then we're going to go back into some of the questions we talked about in the planning call. Don is asking, can an owner use Rocket Lawyer for a storage lease agreement? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if either of you know the answer to that as well.
I guess if there's a Rocket Lawyer that knows the intricacies of self-storage.
Sure. Right.
I guess
that
so.
Seems like one of like those online, like Legal Zoom or something to me, right? Not to say that it's not a trustworthy source. I'm sure they are, but so what would like be a good question for an owner operator? I mean, they just could basically ask, right? Have you ever dealt with self-storage facilities and properties, and do you know the intricacies of those?
I mean, if you've operated a facility, you know what the differences are between this business and, say, operating an apartment building or a shopping center.
Sure. And it is different, right? I mean, there's different intricacies here. I mean, we're month-to-month leases, right? We're not long-term leases like an apartment complex, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, whatever. So, I would just say, Don, I would just, if you're looking to hire legal counsel, just maybe ask them that question. Have you ever dealt in self-storage industry before? And maybe ask them for some client referrals, and you can go ask those clients, what their experience was like. So, while this has a sad connotation to it, but I will bring this up. When we were talking in the planning call, I was asking you, what are some of those like top legal questions that tend to come y'all's way? And you both like almost simultaneously said, what happens when a tenant dies? What do I do? So let's talk about this. Sadly, Aunt Susie has passed away. What do we do with Aunt Susie's things? Can other people come access Aunt Susie's things? Like, tell me what happens when Aunt Susie dies. Alana, go ahead. You start.
So I will always start it off with, you need to contact your legal counsel because I'm not a lawyer. And there's a lot that goes into it. There is arbitration. There are family that fight over the weirdest things. And some of those things are the storage unit. Who has access? Who's an authorized user of this account? There's a lot of things that go into this. I also hear owners go, well, I know the person died because I saw their obituary, but no one's come forward, so I can just auction it off, right? I'm like, well, they died. You know that they've passed away. If you didn't know, that would be one thing, but so you've got to go through a whole different set of, rules because your tenant is dead. So I always send them to Jeff. Call my friend Jeff.
Call Jeff.
Right. So it's very fact specific, but the ultimate sort of first response is you really want to find out if the family is willing to go through probate, because you don't want to be the judge of who should be getting into that unit. And we always say the more urgent it is that a family member get into that unit before the body's even cold, the less likely it is that person is the one that should be getting into that unit. That's normally the divorced ex-stepmother or something like that who has ultimately no right to be in that unit and is trying to con their way in. So probate courts or probate documents or affidavits of claiming through probate are the safe documents that tell you that someone else has decided or ruled, or at least is aware that this person is responsible for claiming the goods on behalf of the estate or the family. And estate doesn't necessarily mean that a full-blown probate estate has been opened. This is more estate is more loosely used in this term, in this situation of just who is claiming the property, so that you haven't given access or let people in that aren't supposed to, because inevitably when you make that decision, the right people shortly thereafter show up and you've bought yourself a lawsuit. And then there's sort of this cascading set of options after that of people, lesser options or less desirable options that can happen, but aren't as good. And so you certainly aren't as happy about those options, but you at least want to ask. And some people don't want to admit they've opened probate because they're afraid you're going to come after them for money. So one of the first things we try to tell our clients is don't be so concerned about the money as it is just trying to find out if there's a designated representative.
Gotcha.
Sometimes called an executor, sometimes called an administrator. Not a lot of difference between the two, sort of semantic differences.
And we even get asked, I don't know. I know the tenant is dead. Their son has the access code to the gate. They have the key to get in the lock. Am I required to overlock it to keep them out? And that's one of those things where I'm like, you need to contact your lawyer. I'm not giving you legal advice. You need to contact legal counsel. I mean, do you lock them out? That wouldn't. And it's a tough situation because you don't know that, their daughter was actually supposed to have access to it, not the son. And the son stole the key from mom and she wrote down the access code on the back of the business card. So it's a tough situation to be in. Thankfully, by the time they get to me, it's in lien status. So I'm like, put the overlock on. If they're in lien status, put the overlock on. It should have been on already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most definitely. So let's talk a little bit about wrongful sale of someone's goods. I don't know if this is a recent story or if it's an old one, but I remember seeing this recently. Someone in the military was deployed and they couldn't get in touch with him because he was deployed, and they got rid of his stuff and he took it to litigation and he won a significant amount of money from what I'm remembering in this article. I want to say it was like 60 grand. It could have been more, could have been less. I'm going off memory. What was it?
60.
It was 60K. Yeah. So, I mean, let's talk about that. Like, no one wants to pay out 60K, right? Over someone's goods that probably were not anywhere near 60K worth of items. Maybe they were. I'm not like intimately involved with that story. So how do we avoid the wrongful sale of someone's stuff?
So I will tell my general explanation. Obviously, your lease should ask, are you active military? Are you in the military? And if they have said yes, or if they have said no, either way, you should also, have a fail safe, get a social security number, run the social, see, double check everything. You want to do your checks and balances. And there's great services out there like Late to Lien where you can have them do every single lien and make you in compliance. Mm-hmm. And it's just an extra step to keep you protected. Your lease should help protect you from that. And they should have had that. They honestly, and if they lost it, they most likely didn't do their due diligence in the lease process and then following through that lien of checking.
Yeah.
Right. So answer one, if we're just asking about military people, my first gut response is be grateful it was only $60,000, because if you wrongfully sell a military member, you can also go to jail.
Mhm.
And
Oh,
the
yeah,
Judge
yeah,
Advocate
true. Good
General's
point.
office has said that they would rather pursue criminal charges than civil penalties these days.
Oof.
And so 60,000 sounds great to me, rather than X number of months in prison.
Correct. I agree.
Every day of the week.
Yeah.
So
Anyone that ends in Y, right?
yeah. So that's that. If you don't know, and we probably don't have time to go through it in great detail today, but there is a federal law that requires you to ask about military service of your occupant and their dependents every time you rent. And so that's got to be a question built into your rental agreement. You need to ask that question. You need to ask the right question. You need to make sure it's being asked correctly and answered correctly before you rent to people. And the fact that you might do online rentals does not excuse you from asking the question and making sure it's answered properly, and then double checking before you sell. That's like the 20,000 foot answer. Our late to lien service does do military checks when people fall into our service, so that you know whether or not they're military. But you have to meet us halfway. You have to have enough information on the occupant that we can run that military check. If you're one of these people who says, like, I don't want any personal information on these people, then we can't run the check or accurately run the check. But wrongful sales in general, that's just having good procedures.
Right. Policies, procedures, operating standards, all of the things.
Right. That's all of it from the beginning. We help you with that. Alana helps you with that. The SBOA helps you with that. We all have pieces of that we work with. I mean, if you think you just collect the money, and when someone doesn't pay, you just send them a notice and throw them up on the website, that's a very sort of sophomoric view of this industry. And I would say, to a person, every one of us that is a vendor in this industry, and I would say almost every operator who has lived through a scare, would tell you, you don't want to sell unless you absolutely have to. Sale is, I mean, the sign outside says self-storage, not self-storage sales.
Right. That's a last resort to recoup the unit, to be able to obviously re-rent that to somebody that's going to be in good standing with you. So Allison is asking, do you have to have the social to do the military check, their social security number?
Right. The social gets you the most accurate military check. Dates of birth gets you a pretty accurate military check. I'm not going to lie and say that if you're looking for Jeff Greenberger in the military, the date of birth is going to be good enough. But like a Bill Smith or a Juan Gonzalez, you're going to have doubt.
Yeah.
The real reason to get a social, one of the better reasons to get a social, is when you have to do a bankruptcy check, because you cannot do that by date of birth. That's just not going to pop up.
Right.
That's a different database, and it doesn't work by date of birth.
Okay. Now, Dawn is asking, so we talked military status. What if my tenant, and we talked, Aunt Susie passed away, unfortunately. What if cousin Eric lands himself in jail? What happens now?
Is cousin Eric our tenant?
We're going to visit him, sending him commissary money. I'm kidding. Go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry.
Is cousin Eric our tenant?
Yep.
Cousin Eric doesn't get any special rights.
Because
his last known address is his jail cell.
Well, no, not unless he gives it to us in writing.
Right. True.
Right? His last known address is the one on the rental agreement. unless or until somebody updates it.
Yeah, and it's not like we're checking the county, website to see if cousin Eric is in jail. That's not a standard procedure to see, are they a jailbird currently? Military is one, bankruptcy is another, and jail not so much.
I would hope I hope all of you would agree with me. Being like Charlie Manson should not afford you extra rights.
Yeah, right. Oh, Jeff, you always have good one-liners.
Well, I mean, I look at it that way. I mean,
Yeah,
we can all say certain prisoners are controversial, but I think we can all agree on Charlie Manson.
Yeah.
Or Jeffrey Dahmer or whoever, right?
Oof.
Why would you afford that person extra rights?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
No prisoner gets extra rights.
Yeah.
You don't get extra privileges for holding up a bank.
Man, what a world it would be if they did. I'd be scared for that world. So I mean,
maybe heading there someday, but not now.
Oh gosh, it's scary. So kind of like to surmise all of this, I mean, it just like you keep just owning in on that rental agreement. What's in the lease? So the
And
the lease
why?
It's your first line of defense.
Well, yeah. But not only that, remember, the statute only gives you very, very limited stuff. It's called a lien law for a reason. It gives you a lien.
Yep.
Maybe it tells you what you can charge for a late fee. Maybe it gives you one or two other little bits of direction. Every other thing that you do in self-storage has to be contractual. If it's not in your rental agreement, you don't have it.
Got it.
Right? Lien laws do not tell you how you can charge rent, where to pay rent, whether or not you carry insurance, how much insurance. None of the stuff that you do every day, what gate hours have to be.
You can't live in it.
Right. Well, some of them say you may not use it as a residence, but you're right. Okay.
Which we see a lot, right?
What the bathroom hours are.
Yeah.
But my point is, it's all got to be in the rental agreement, because if you don't put it in the rental agreement and it's signed, we're locked.
Mm-hmm.
And that's 100%. Why we hone in on the rental agreement. That's why that silly little document is so important. It's your Bible after that.
It is. Yeah, for sure. Jeff, someone's asking, this is from Don. Do you know the rules and laws of each state? Like, could you go help someone in every single state in the United States?
We do. And then what we say is, after we're done drafting, we do require you to use a local attorney to review it for custom, not law, sense. But for custom, right? Because we won't know whether your local judges and so forth require things to be printed on pink paper or 27-point type or something like that. So we work your local attorneys don't need to know self-storage or local or state law, but we do need them involved at the end to approve it.
Got it. And then I'm going to wrap this up with one final question. I'm going to answer the first part by putting it in the comments. Is there a website for late to lien? Yes, there is. And it's exactly what it says, late to the number 2. So late2lien.com. And then Jeff, Michelle will finish out, because I know we're coming to the end here and I know Jeff has to run. Should, in addition to the driver's license, ask for social security number? What about past tenants that are past due?
So I'm going to jump in on something that I know a mutual customer of Jeff and I's does. They have a keypad for that social security number. They're not getting it in writing from them. It goes straight into their software. It's not displayed to that manager right then and there. It's available for, if you go through Jeff, to be able to get that social, but it's a more secure way of getting it. They're not writing it down, and there's easy ways how you get it from them. For past tenants, I don't know, but the current tenants, there are ways within your software to gain that information in a secure fashion.
And what I would say about past tenants are, every contract is a 30-day contract. If they're there and they're paying rent and still using the unit, you have some way to reach them. You can post notices on their units. You can ultimately say, if you're playing hide and seek with me, we can ultimately say, you either start communicating with me, or, and again, if times are bad, I don't mean this quite this strictly, but leave.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you guys so much for today. Unfortunately, we are getting close to the end of time. Alana, before we exit out, your services are nationwide because it's online. You don't have to send an auctioneer to the facility to do their rambling, blah, blah, blah. My grandfather was an auctioneer, and it's really fun to hear him do that. I actually grew up in an auction house. It is. It's pretty amazing. But tell us, kind of what, if somebody wants to put the auction online, when they get to the phase of being able to auction the stuff, what does that process look like from your team?
Yeah, it's very easy. The easiest way I explain it to people is it's like Storage Wars and eBay had a love child, and it's me. So you are putting it online. You're taking the photos. I did once introduce myself to Dan Dotson as his love child. It didn't go over very well. My joke kind of missed the mark. But you
Not
do.
your fault.
I know. I tried. I really did try. But you take the photos, you upload the photos on our website, and you have the ability through most major softwares to have a sync where it pulls over all of your delinquent tenants, creates that auction for you. You upload the photos, you put in the description, and you're off to the races. So you set your rules. You are following your state's lien laws. So if you have to have your newspaper ad running for 14 days, we recommend having your auction end at the time of the auction listed in your newspaper ad and keep it live during that 14 days. It can just keep going. Your auction ends and you get one bidder who's going to show up to your facility with whatever payment method you're asking for. We recommend cash, that they come and pay you that, and they clean out the unit and you have your rentable space back. So you're not waiting to build up 5 units. You have 1 unit. We specialize a lot in the remote areas because you're going to get people who are willing to drive 3-4 hours for a unit they want. They're not going to drive your 3 and 4 hours and pay $6 a gallon for gas for a unit they might not win, or the tenant's going to pay 5 minutes before they get there. So the online has really picked up, especially during COVID, because you weren't allowed to have a certain amount of people on your site, and then everything started costing more, so more people were going online to save themselves some money. But yeah, it's easy.
Yeah, if anyone's not using Alana's service, and I always say I highly encourage throughout these a lot, but it's because I mean it. I would highly encourage getting in touch with Alana. They make the process very seamless, very easy for you. They're a very involved group with the entire process. They will hold your hand through everything. Jeff, I would assume the same for late to lien through that process as well. So thank you both for being here so much. And just a quick announcement, next week, Thursday, December 8th from 12 to 5 is our final Storage for Rookies educational event, virtual event for the 2022 year. And we'll have more in 2023, and we're actually expanding that program. So please stay tuned for that. Thank you all for being members of the SBOA and joining us on these. And yes, Chuck, a replay is always available for anyone that doesn't know of these sessions on our YouTube channel, which is Storage Business Owners Alliance. You can go find us on YouTube. Please subscribe, like the channel, follow us on social media. We're very active on social. Alana's very active on social with Storage Auctions. We're going to work on Jeff getting more active on social with late to lien, but
Jess and I are just going to take it over.
And I are going to start.
No.
Exactly. He'll be like, I'm getting all this business out of nowhere. Like, what's happening? Oh, we're doing your social media for you. So I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. If we don't see you next week for Storage for Rookies, and I did put the link for storageforrookies.com in the chat, so you can go check that program out and register with us. There is a $10 off the ticket coupon that's available if you type in, I think, gift 10 is the promo code. But have a happy holiday season, everyone. And if I don't see you next week, we'll see you guys next year. Thanks for joining us. Bye, Jeff. Bye, Alana.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.